some members, and most of our members are having as good an April as they did last April last year, or better. We've had some members have record new member months because they're doing all the same things with just the small tweaks that they need to make to be productive and successful during this online time. And there's some opportunities when everybody's activities are completely blown up that we've never had before. There's schools, churches, organizations that would never talk to you before that now will talk to you. There's gyms that are all closed, so now people don't have those activities to go to. They might choose our activities. So there's a lot of opportunities. And as this turns to come back, this turns in everybody's state, it's all a little different, as it's changing to come back. We're looking forward to talking to everybody today about how to make sure you make the most of this so that you can have very, very good and productive months, and maybe record months, not just, hope you survive and hope you get through this, because it's going to be a while. If you make that assumption, you're not going to be very happy at the end of this.
Yeah. And sorry about that distraction. Master Smith should be joining us here in a minute. But to anchor what you're saying, Master Moody, I think the first step for anybody who's on here with us live or watching the replay, if you haven't set yourself up to be thriving during the complete lockdown, is you've got to master those skills as things start to open up. Because, the metaphor that I've adopted recently that I stole from Dr. Fauci a little bit on one of the press conferences is he said, well, it's not going to be like flipping a light switch and everything is back to normal. It's going to be a gradual return to normalcy. I've adopted the light switch into a dimmer switch. We're going to be gradually turning that dimmer switch back on to normal. But as we do that, we've got to have learned to thrive in the current environment as we do that. So Master Smith is now joining us here. But the first thing, and maybe we should go through, and by the way, for everyone on the webinar today or watching the replay, we have put together what I think are a couple of really comprehensive checklists. One is thriving during the complete shutdown, and then the next one is effectively gradually reopening. And so Bob Dunn is here with us. If you wanted to give Bob a call, he'll make sure you get both those checklists, the checklist for the reopening and the checklist for the thriving during the shutdown. Bob, why don't you share with them your phone number?
Yes, sir. I'm also putting it up where my name would normally be, so that way it's up there permanently. But it's 720-256-0208.
Yeah, so if you want to give Bob a call when we're done, he can make sure that you get both of those checklists. We'll also make sure you get a bunch of other free material, but I think these are worth their weight in gold. Wouldn't you say, Master Moody? It was.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, even though I was part of you putting the checklist together, I still gave that to my staff. We went through it, and there was a lot of little pieces that that they weren't doing that made a huge difference, all the difference in the world. Because I think if you just start trying to adapt and do things, you'll miss some things, and that's the collective knowledge from not just us, but all of our members and the things that they learned, and we're continuing to make improvements on that. And so that's even. I think we've even improved the checklist. If people if they got the checklist when we first put it out, you ought to give Bob a call and get the updated version of that so that you make sure that you've got all the little pieces that we've improved on how to set up Zoom right if you're using Zoom, how to teach the classes right, how to make sure you market during this time and still get members. That's what I keep hearing is, well, I'm just surviving. I've kept 50% of my students. No, you should be keeping over 90%, 95% of your students and be marketing to grow your school. You've got to be able to do that. So, and I think you said something really important. If you don't master the skills, if in April you didn't master the skills to be successful, if you don't have those skills down really well, then as the dimmer switch turns and whatever version this turns into in all your different states, whatever that ends up being, you're not going to be very successful as this turns back into something different, because we don't even know if it turns back into something different and maybe regresses a little bit because maybe there's a spike in in the coronavirus during that time. So you've got to be really good at this version of the business. And the beauty of our business is we can do that. If you were doing soccer, t-ball, baseball, tennis, something else, and you had to be outside or you had to be with other people, you have no chance of being successful during this time. You know, thank goodness you're not the airlines for now. I mean, you have an opportunity to do that right now that's really productive.
Yeah, and let's try to segment this into 4 or 5 segments, and we're going to try to keep it to about 45 minutes, which means we're going to have to fly through each one of them. And again, if you want to give Bob a call, we'll give you more comprehensive and some other support tools and recordings. But first segment was maintaining high quality student support during the shutdown. Segment 2 is effectively doing introductory and enrollment conferences purely virtual. Segment 3 would be all the marketing that's working right now, that's working tremendously well right now. Number 4 would be pricing and structure during the shutdown. Number 5 would be renewals and maintaining business as usual. And then number 6 is the transition back towards normalcy and what it's going to look like there, and how to, our next iteration is going to be re-grand opening, how to add 100 new students to your school. But let's do one thing at a time. As a quick checklist, probably what most everybody is doing already anyway, but you should have transitioned thoroughly to your entire class schedule being virtual. What we find is some people did, well, here's what a lot of schools do, and there's some, as Master Smith, as you and Master Moody, Mr. Dunn know, there were some critically negligent advice being given by people who otherwise are held in high esteem in our industry. But what we know didn't work is just doing some Facebook live casts or some YouTube videos, and and sharing links with some of your students for them to train at home on their own. What we also know has to happen is you've got to get 90-95% of your student body fully intact, working on progress updates, stripe testing, making testing progress, taking classes, engaging in classes virtually, and you've got to be engaged in class attendance and know who's there, who's missing. Plus, we want to add a lot of other support tools that you may not have been using before. Everything from character lessons to additional textbook training to giving them training aids to carry on at home. Master Smith, what would you add to that on what some of the transition keep the student body intact would have been?
Well, what I found the hardest thing for a lot of the school owners were realizing that nothing has changed. Everything is the same, except you have, and we picked this up from a friend of ours who used this terminology, is you have a new classroom. It's not, yeah, it's just like you moved your school, and you moved it from a physical school just to a virtual school. So everything should be done exactly the way you did it before. The only difference is you have to learn how to interact with the computer or laptop or iPad or iPhone, or however you're doing it. But you got to have your classes going, and the first step in doing that, and our goal was to keep at least 90% plus students, because there's some students that might not want to, but it's pretty much, we found that some of them, even 95% of them, are actively on it, but it requires you texting, emailing, calling, and continually doing all 3 of those phases with every student you have until you get a hold of them. You've got to make sure that they understand what your position is, how you're training them, what's going on, what's the schedule. And the least interruption you have from the way it was before to what it is now, that's why we advised everybody to keep the exact same schedule. So you start at 3:30 or 4 or whenever you started, and finish at 8 o'clock or whenever you finished. And then they started adding some extra benefit classes in the daytime with character development or just a fitness workout or whatever little extra they wanted to add into. So what we found is that parents were now saying, wow, we're so impressed. You've given us even more value than we were getting before, and started sending praises of testimonials about how beneficial it was, because they were interacting with the students and actually giving these kids excitement about having something to look forward to each day where they could interact with some of their normal procedures.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So, and Master Moody, what would you add to that? We're seeing 95% participation rate. And frankly, we're seeing in March and April, no worse of dropouts than normal. We're trying to keep it at 1 or 2%. So we've got a lot of members who haven't lost any more than that. Obviously, there's some exceptions to that, especially among the 20 to 30-year-old adult male segment of student bodies. But what would you add to that, Master Moody?
I think that the biggest thing is bad assumptions. You know, when this all kind of came down, we had a lot of people freaking out for two reasons. One is they said, oh my God, the state said we had to close. And then they said, oh my God, everybody's going to be out of work. Well, the reality of it was very far from that. You didn't have to close. You could stay open completely. It just was online. As Master Smith said, it's like you moved your school down the street. You moved it from a mile down the street to another location. You just had to tell everybody. If you moved your school and you sent 3 emails out, 1 email a week, like one guy I talked to, and he was complaining because only 20% of his students kept training. Well, if you only sent 1 email a week, and they showed up at your school and there was no sign up and nothing happened and it looked like you were closed, and by the way, the government all said everybody had to close, well then, big surprise that only 20-30% of your students moved over to your new location. Well, it's going to be the same way online. So that's number one, is they freaked out about that, and then people freaked out because they made this assumption that everybody's going to be broke. And the reality of it is that there's not that many people. Yeah, unemployment claims are up, but if you look at the real numbers, most of your students that can afford martial arts lessons, if you're charging any kind of decent rate at all, are not in the, you know, service industry at $15 an hour. They're not at minimum wage. And although some of those people are making more money now than what they did before on unemployment, but they're usually, if they can afford doing martial arts lessons as another activity, they're typically not broke. And if there is somebody that is, the third reaction that I saw was they would just cancel them, which is exactly the opposite thing to do. If somebody has a real financial problem, they could give them a month, you know, of a scholarship, or they give them a month off, but then make the assumption that they're going to keep training. The worst thing you could do is put somebody on cancel somebody, because then they're never going to come back ever.
Yeah, and anecdotally, well, 2 things. Above the fold yesterday in Wall Street Journal, I took a picture of it to post. Half of workers get more pay laid off than they were getting while they were working, given the way that the unemployment thing is structured. So one is you've got that factor. And anecdotally, I was out at, I don't know, Noodles, I think, some quick service restaurant picking up, you know, food for the kids and everything. And it was packed. There was, you know, like 4 or 5 Grubhub guys and Uber Eats, people picking up and all this stuff. And I was hearing the conversation among them. They said, oh, yeah, people got their stimulus checks today, so they're buying TVs and eating out. Mm-hmm. So, you know, family of 4 got, what would it be, $3,500 or something like that. So in many cases, not only do you not have a problem with people not having money, in many cases, they actually have more money than they had before. And there's a marketing lesson built in there as well, is, you know, on who you target and fishing the right pond and so forth. But we'll save that one for another day. And even the unemployment numbers, if you watch the news, okay, 22 million people have filed for unemployment, but that's in the context of 176 million people actively working in the workplace. And it's in the context of half of those people who file and receive unemployment are going to get paid more on unemployment than they were getting paid working for the next 4 months. So you know, you shouldn't think that you can't keep your student body together and keep your marketing going and keeping your enrollments flowing because of the impact on the economy in the short term. Let's shift gears now, because we have a lot to cover. Let's talk about marketing opportunities that have opened up, and then we'll talk about virtual enrollments briefly. But Master Moody, as you know, Master Smith, Mr. Dunn, is we've had clients who have double the number of intros in April of 2020 that they had in April of 2019. What we find is we always preach, and I stole this and freely admit from Jay Abraham years ago, but we always preach the Parthenon, having a bunch of different pillars to bringing in new students, right? And some of the things that we love, for instance, if things were normal, next weekend we'd be out at the big AMC movie theaters promoting with the Black Widow movie. Well, we'll still do that. It's just going to be in November. It's not going to be in May this year. But we can't do that right now. We also might be at a big Easter event and having a booth and promoting so forth. Can't do that right now either. But what we do know is that Facebook traffic is up. That was the number you pulled up, Master Moody, up 640%. Even on their earnings call yesterday, Mark Zuckerberg made a point that, their traffic, they're just overwhelmed with traffic right now. And frankly, their advertiser base is down, which means the ad rates are coming down on Facebook. At the same time, their traffic is up 640%. Oh my goodness, what opportunity that is, right? Number two is we know that most of the public and private schools are not in session. So we know that they're more receptive than ever for private virtual classes, free virtual classes that we can provide. What are some of the other things we've seen, guys, that have been just blowing the doors off?
Well, working with churches and organizations and any groups that are going online or have had their activities dropped, we're starting to approach companies that had summer camps, because in a lot of cases, all the summer camp programs have been canceled. So all these companies, and that we don't have a lot of data on yet, but churches, daycares, those companies that really don't have any business now, but they want to support their people just like we do, they can't. So we can get with them and then and we've got a lot of people get some value out of this, is get their lists or have our information sent to them, to their client base, so that they can get some free lessons for us, so they can still participate in something that's ostensibly for supporting their church, supporting their daycare, supporting their school. Just like you said, we've had a lot of results from that. Last week on Monday, we had 20 leads from a flyer that went out from schools. That's just at my school. That's at one school. So that was a really productive activity. So any group that has had their kind of the legs pulled out from under them, if you can work with them. Now, sometimes those guys they're furloughed or gone or whatever. So you have to work a little bit to contact them. Yeah, but when you do, there's a lot of opportunity there to have them do something. And I like to think this time, this time is the first time in history where everybody shifted gears in another way. Like, they can't go to the gym, they can't do any of these other things that they normally would do. So normally it's hard to get with an organization because they've kind of got a rhythm of activities that they normally do. But now that rhythm is completely broken. Everybody's activities are blown up. So this is a time for us to get in front of them. Some of that's going to be for a lot of productive marketing right now, but a lot of that's also, as the dimmer switch turns on, you've got to be in front of everybody everywhere you can possibly be, because now everybody's re-choosing the activity they're going to do that we've never had this in history before.
Yeah, and add to that. Oh, go ahead, Matt Smith.
The thing that we're starting to realize is that we have a captive audience. We have a market now that is so much easier to reach than we did before. There were so many things going on that they didn't really look at our stuff as like they're looking at it now. So the results we're getting from everything we do, and fortunately, our members have been taught your Parthenon of marketing that covers such a wide base of marketing that when we went through that base of marketing, we just said, well, we can't do that, but we can do this, this, this. And that's why the school programs, that's why even our prospect list, my prospect list, when we would send out before to a prospect list, we'd be lucky to get one person commenting or reaching out to us. Now, when we do it, we're getting 10, 20% of those people that we reach out to, which is leads that you had from events before that you've been dripping on, or you've been sending them information that they never responded to. Well, they're going to respond to it now. So go back last year and even the year before, if you had that list, and send all those prospects, even your dropouts. We found a lot of our our students were coming back during this period because they wanted to have something to do while they were home stuck. So going back on that prospect list, dropout students, former students, all of your intros that took an intro that dropped out, anybody who filled out a slip or raised their hand in one of your online things, anything that you have their information, send it to them now, and send it in, not like you said, not just one thing, but you've got to text it, email it, and call. You know, don't forget that
Right,
phone
man.
call.
Yeah.
People are even responding more. If you have their cell number, text them, email them, and do it quite frequently because a lot of times it'll go into a spam filter one time and you send it the next time, it'll go through.
Yeah.
Well, and in direct mail.
Yeah, we're getting a lot of news. A lot of our members are getting old student reactivations right now. So, and I can't tell you how many times, depending on what time of the year it is, how many school owners that I've spoken with have always cried the blues about not being able to or losing students because of either football, soccer, hockey getting in their way, or them going to go do that. And that's not, and it's not in your way right now.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. Is every time I talk to school owners, it seems that one of the number one things that they whine about, which is the right way to phrase it, whine, is, oh my goodness, we're having so many troubles with enrollments right now because everybody's playing soccer or they're playing baseball or football season. I mean, especially in Texas, or hockey or whatever. Well, when in history have you ever had a more open of an on-ramp where all of that stuff is shut down, right? And so, if you sit down and think about what, as a school owner, you were complaining about getting in the way of your enrollments or renewals last fall or in February, is you had all these different kids activities, all these different sports activities, all these different activities that people were doing. And your adults aren't choosing between you and going to the gym right now because the gym is locked up. And they're not choosing between you and soccer right now because the soccer league got canceled until 2021. So you've got a wide open field. And now what happens is, more so than in 2 or 3 years, people are in fact reading their email. And I just love direct mail. But they're reading the mail in their mailbox, and they on average get only 4 pieces of mail in their mailbox. They're actually reading their email for a change, and even though they get 180 or 200 emails a day in most cases. So that reactivation of old students and the ability to go back through anybody who took an intro and didn't enroll, registered on your website but never made an appointment and never showed up, came to a birthday party, gave you contact information and never came back in, came to a buddy day, anybody who you met at a live booth or something like that and you got contact information. The response rate is through the roof for those people. And I'll add something else. We did, the last 2 months seem like 2 years to me. It's been so busy, so much opportunity. But I think it was almost 2 months ago now, we did a special meeting for our members with Lee Meltier and with Don Southerton. And what it was all about is how to get free publicity. And Master Smith, you and I come from probably the world's best ever in the martial arts, June Rhee, who was also great friends with probably the best ever in the world of sports, Muhammad Ali. But free press right now is just abundant. One of the things that we've always taught is the one way to get free press is to get inside the story that's already going on and figuring out a way that you fit in that story. Well, there's never been a better time when the press is covering the corona thing 24/7. The funny meme I showed was the Pentagon finally released proof of UFOs, and the world is so crazy on the virus thing that nobody even noticed, right? I mean, there's all this other stuff, but the press is covering the coronavirus thing, right? So if you watch the news, is when they cover businesses, they're usually, this restaurant owner who sold their prized Corvette so they could pay their staff to keep their staff on, or it's a business owner who, if they're not reopened in 30 days, they're going to be out of business. And occasionally there's some success story, but they'd love to have more positive success stories. especially positive success stories with teaching kids, teaching families, and creating normalcy in people's lives. So the video, exactly, the activity. So we've had great coverage in newspapers, radio, and especially TV. The TV stations just love to come to your school and set up and watch you teaching a Zoom class, or, soon, teaching to 10 people, social distance with masks on. But they just love to come and cover. Here's a business that you thought would have been wiped out that's thriving. I don't know how many conversations I've had of people saying, oh my goodness, you work with martial arts schools. Yeah, they're all thriving. What do you mean they're thriving? They're shut down. No, they're not shut down at all. They're doing this for their students. They're doing this, they're doing this, they're doing this, and they're marketing, and they're bringing in new traffic, and they're doing renewals, and their grosses is doing just fine. That's a great press story. And we've had members who are getting online press, the different blogs and all that kind of stuff. But most importantly, real TV coverage, real daily newspaper coverage, real coverage on all their radio stations, showing what it is they're doing, locally, regionally, even nationally. So what have we hit so far? Going back to your prospect list, going back to your inactive students, contacting them through direct mail, email, text, live outbound call, retargeting on Facebook, retargeting in Google, all of the above. The other thing that we said was really working is contacting all the local elementary schools, middle schools, high schools, and helping them promote. Master Moody spent quite a bit of time talking about churches, Boy Scout troops, other organizations, soccer leagues, baseball leagues, other summer camps that have already canceled for the summer, but getting them to communicate with their customer list to move them to you, and also not necessarily move them to you, but to offer free virtual classes for their clientele. And of course, you have a lot of reciprocity you can do when things roll around with them as well.
Yeah, to complement what they're doing. Yeah. It's a compliment. Think about what's in it for them. It's a benefit for them, to their people, to keep them connected with their group. Thanks a lot for being here with the Boy Scout troop, for example. Yeah. So it absolutely can complement. Will you get some people say, no, you're competitive with me or whatever? Sure. So what? Find the other 500, because there's never been a time where everybody's stuff's blown up.
Yeah. And
but we can still operate. We can still work. I think the big message here is don't make this assumption that it's supposed to be bad for us.
No. Yeah. It's supposed to be fabulous, because we can make it into fabulous. And then the last piece of the marketing there, and I'll point it back to you, Bob, is I mentioned Facebook. Their engagement and viewership is up 640%. And according to Zuckerberg yesterday, their advertising base has dropped, which means the ad rates are dropped. Therefore, the cost per lead is down. We've had members that have had 100 to 200, even 300 intros in April from Facebook. Going back to the elementary school and the other organizations, one had 300 intros just from one school, sending everybody to come participate. I don't know how many kids were in that school, probably 500 or 600, but 300 is a big number of online registrations there, right? So, and there's other stuff we could talk about, but we know these pillars are working fabulous, and we have a lot of members who have more intro traffic than they can keep track of right now. So you've got to pull the trigger on that. But let's shift gears so we can hopefully hit at least a little bit on each of these 5 topics.
And Oliver, if I could just get everybody up to speed. So take care of your students you have. Get them all back in. Make sure they're all on your interactive meetings. And then next, start getting your marketing going big time. If you don't have the marketing going, and then of course, once you have the marketing, as a lot of our members started realizing, is that teaching the intro and the enrollment was really no different than doing it in the school normally. So I think that's kind of our next step, is we've got to get now that we've got the marketing going, let's make sure we're making the appointments and the intros and the enrollment process to go smoothly too.
You
And
bet.
I just wanted to point out how important what you guys are teaching and explaining to everybody is, because again, I do talk with a lot of school owners, and there's quite a few of them that have just kind of ducked their head, put it in the sand, and they're waiting for their, you know, their check to show up in the mail, and hopefully the storm will pass, and then it'll all be back to normal. Well, it's not going to be back to normal. And there is going to be a transition. Also, we don't know, God forbid it does happen again, but when the fall hits, we may be back into the same boat or a similar boat anyhow. So it's very important that what you guys are explaining and teaching is hitting home, because it's it's great knowledge. It's going to help you, and you may have to use it not only now, but possibly again in the future. You know?
Yeah, and it's so funny trolling, you know, like the other martial arts business discussion groups, and watching, you know, people will post stuff on our stuff, but there's so many negative people running around right now. And, you know, I keep hearing, well, none of my students will come to these video classes. They don't like it. Well, we're just flooded with people who are so appreciative of maintaining some level of normalcy. But of course, what we started with is replicating everything we were doing, and then plussing it, then plussing it, then plussing it, then plussing it. So giving them additional training aids, maintaining their stripe progress, maintaining their belt test progress, doing progress updates, giving them additional textbooks and assignments, doing a special morning workout with everybody, doing a midday mat chat, a afternoon leadership lesson, doing a whole bunch of stuff. And admittedly, it is exhausting. I'd say all of our members, the ones that are thriving the most, they're probably working harder than they've worked in 5 years. But they're keeping their students are excited, and their students are becoming so loyal because they're so appreciative of everything they're doing.
And they take their time, Master Oliver. You know, one of the things that I was impressed with is that they were contacting each of these families and actually walking them through how to log on, how to get onto the Facebook, how to download the app for Zoom meetings. So they knew how to interact and be able to see the instructor, and the instructor can see them, and the instructor can correct them. Heck, the instructors have even been testing them online. So it's a learning process that you're going to have to do a little extra work to get these people engaged that are you know, at your school already, and keep that 90% or higher group. You know, Amanda Olson, you know, in Johnson City, Tennessee, she's already done 30 enrollments this month already.
That was as of Monday.
Oh, right. Was it?
Yeah, okay. I don't even know what she's done.
A lot of our public school systems have already done a lot of that work for us, Master Smith. I mean, they've taught them how to hop on Zoom, how to do the classes. So a lot of that's actually been done for you guys already, to just point them how to get in, you know, where to go. But they're already doing it with a lot of their public school systems.
Yeah. Well, I'll say it even a little stronger. I think it's negligent for anybody in the industry to give advice that's not to try to thrive and grow at this time. If you don't try to do that, if you're trying to do that, if anybody's not trying to grow and thrive right now, they very likely could be out of business at within some amount of time here. You have to do that, because it's not going to be changing back to normalcy for, it could be a year. If you aren't working on growing and thriving now in the environment we have now, you are going to be in big trouble. Now, for some people, I think this is a really important call, where they may need to follow up with us to get the checklist and the other stuff, because I understand maybe some people are just like, well, I don't know how the hell to do that. You know, and that's why we're on this call now. But it's negligent. It's absolutely negligent for people to try to do this hunker down idea on any business, particularly ours, because you don't have.
And by the way, if you're running a martial arts school and you're spending even a minute worrying about how do I file unemployment and I haven't gotten that yet, and oh my God, there's this PPP thing, but I can't figure out how to get that, and there's this disaster loan, and I haven't gotten that yet, and oh my God, where's my stimulus money? If you're spending more than 5 minutes on all of that stuff together and thinking of any of that as a savior, you shouldn't be. Now, there's nothing wrong with applying for PPP. It ran out of money once, it'll run out of money again. Maybe you get your nose to the trough, maybe you don't. And by the way, basically just free money because they're going to pay your payroll for a couple of months, fine. And if you want to do the loan and grant thing and you get $1,000 per employee and all that stuff, fine. I don't even care about that. I don't want to lay debt on during this time because we should be increasing revenue, and frankly, our expenses should be down right now. So, but if you know, if you're working with anybody who's spending any time focusing on those things rather than focusing you on how you keep your revenue growing, keep your student body intact, and by the way, you can reduce your expenses a little bit here and there for the time being. That's what you should be focusing on. Let's move through because I was going to try to wrap in about 5 minutes, and we've hit 2 of 5 topics.
You got the wrong people together, sir, to do that.
Yeah. Well, that's exactly right. But let's just touch on this. Is on enrollments and renewals, one of the negligently bad pieces of advice that I've seen floating around is doing some other program structure or some other price point for your virtual classes until you're back open in your physical facility. That's really bad advice. We have members who are enrolling people with $300, $400, $500, $600 to start, $197 to $297 a month on a 12-month agreement right now. Stay with the price point that you were at, stay with the enrollment structure you're at, and don't change your introductory process. The only thing that changed is, in some cases, for a while, they're going to be on camera rather than they're going to be physically in your school, right? We have some schools in Tennessee, Georgia, Texas, who are already doing small group introductory classes in the school. And that's great. It's not going to be for every intro. We'll talk about that in a second. But whatever your normal introductory process was, I like to do a first intro as a small group and then have them go into a beginner's class, then pull them out of the beginner's class and enroll them. And we're able to do that just fine using Zoom. We can do a breakout room, pull them into another room, give them feedback and enroll, or we can do small group class and then schedule them for a third as a private where we enroll them then. No matter what the offer is, we're doing the same structure. So I will say the normal enrollment process, if you were closing 80% before, you should still be able to close 80%. Your ratios may be a little weaker for the first couple you do, just because you're getting comfortable with it. But stay on your normal enrollment process, stay on your normal renewal process. That's working just fine remotely as well. Plus, we're now at a point where, at least in most of the states, people are seeing the light at the end of the tunnel as far as renewals. So they're perceiving return to normalcy. But let's go back to what you alluded to, Master Moody, and you alluded to, Bob, is as, use my metaphor of the dimmer switch, as things come back up, I'm looking at social media, the news, talking to people, and what I'm seeing is more polarization than ever in history, probably, at least in the United States. But people have gone completely crazy with the 24/7 news coverage and the shutdowns and so forth. But within your student body, think about it this way. I don't know what the right percentages are, but more or less, you have 25 or 30% on one end of the spectrum who are in the mindset of they're not like leaving their house until there's a proven vaccine and a proven cure and everything is completely back to normal. Then you have 25% or so on the other end of the spectrum that think the whole thing was crap and it should be everything is business as usual, and they're ready to come back into your school and grapple and, you know, roll, spar, whatever. But then you have those in the middle. So let's say it's 25%, 25%, and 50%. Then you have the ones in the middle who are cautious. I saw a great, it's called a town hall with Mark Cuban a couple of days ago. And, you know, they ask him, you know, with the Dallas Mavericks and your other businesses, as soon as they open up in Texas, is everything back to normal? And his answer was, well, I'm a parent. And my rule is it's not going to be back to normal until I'm not worried about my kids going to sit in an auditorium with 18,000 people. And so there's going to be a transitional phase and a new normal for a while. And I think that was a great way to think about it, is an awful lot of your students when things start to open up, are probably going to be willing to come back to your school, but you're going to have the table, and you're going to have to be checking their temperature, and you're going to have a required mask, preferably a private labeled, branded for your school, and have everybody wearing that. You're going to have the school marked off so that they're maybe like little tournament rings, so they stay 6 foot apart. If they're sparring or grappling with a partner, you're going to have it be maybe family members can, but students who aren't in the same household, you're not going to be doing that for a while. So there's going to be this transition phase where you've got to keep all the virtual stuff going for intros who aren't comfortable yet, and for students who aren't comfortable yet. And you're going to have to monitor the school, look at what the CDC is recommending, look at what the White House is recommending, look at what your state is recommending, look at what your local officials are recommending, and then take cleanliness 3 steps above that, and have visibly, you're disinfecting the entire school between every class. No class has more than enough people where you can keep them 6 or 8 foot apart. You're checking them at the front. Build on that, Master Smith, Master Moody. What else would you add to that?
Well, and one thing we talked about in our meeting as well is make sure that when we communicate, over-communicate to the students, because there's bound to be, as you said, there's going to be people at either end of this extreme. That I'm not too worried in this situation of the people that want to train, because they want to train in your school, because they'll be jumping on that. But the ones who somehow think you're morally wrong because you opened up at all and allowed one person in the school with your instructor, and before a vaccine was out, you'll get some of those. And we've already had some of our members that have done a fantastic job of the safety protocols, but yet they still got somebody, a couple people getting excited about that. You've got to be a little bit not numb to that complaint, but address those individually just like you would normally, and over communicate about how I think we came up with the best phrase today, exceeding the standards of the CDC, White House, and the state. And it doesn't have to exceed them by a lot, but if you exceed the standards a little bit, like what you said, to take the temperature in the front, that's probably never going to be on anybody's standard plan for any state. Having the mask ready for them, and the other things that we can do would be better than the standards that are required by the government. That's going to take a lot of any kind of people on the one camp that think that nobody should ever go back to being in the same room together for the next 3 years. So I think that's going to be the big deal, is over communicate. And something that we just got to reiterate, don't just email them one time. We've said multiple times, and I guess it just bears repeating, when we say mail, we mean real mail. To text them a couple times. We see so often, we get asked all the time, not to go on a tangent, but what martial arts management software should you use? The answer is use whatever you're using, but you got to do a lot more than what those software programs are allowing you to do, because none of them do enough to do all the stuff that we're telling you to do. You got to email probably daily basis when this stuff comes around, text a whole bunch, mail them for real, call them for real. You can use voice broadcast, and every method you have with your students as this transition happens, along with making sure you do one-on-ones that can turn into renewals, or if you're using the term upgrades, those kind of conversations, so that your school does do well financially as well. So all those things can be tied together. I think that just bears mentioning. And it really isn't any different than if you moved a location and then you change the schedule. You're going to get some people complaining and whining and saying stuff. You have to deal with it the same way. So don't take as these changes happen, you're going to get people with all kinds of reactions, and you've got to deal with it the same way as if you'd had a normal situation with a parent.
Yeah. The other thing, Master Oliver, that sometimes when they were teaching the intros and doing the enrollment conference, some people were getting, even though it seems like it would be simple, some people were getting bogged down with, well, how do we get them to sign the paperwork? And it's real simple. They do it just like they're going to Chick-fil-A drive-through. They drive up, you walk out at the curb, and you give them their uniform and their white belt if they earned it. And then they sign their paperwork, and you give them their copy, just no different. If some people don't like to venture out or want to do a curbside pickup, Some of our schools were even driving it by and then doing it just like a pizza delivery. They walked up to the front door, here's the uniform, they signed the paperwork, and they were good to go. Others didn't want any contact at all, so what they did was text them or email them a copy of the contract. They printed it off and then signed it and then took a picture of it with their phone and sent it back. And then we sent them the uniform in the mail. So you've got a lot of options there, but just make sure you try to do the thing that's easiest for you first. And if that doesn't work, you go to one of the others.
Yeah, yeah. And, you know, continuing, Master, I grabbed one off my, under my desk here. You know, I don't know why people get so centric on software and email. You know, when we say over communicate, I mean, to me, over communicating with every student is I have picked up the phone, called them, walked them through and explained it to them. Then I've put together a multi-page letter. I did this for our members, put it in a priority envelope and mailed it to them to make sure they got it. Then I'm sending them a letter or a postcard every week with an update on things and the schedule and so forth. Then when I have a virtual class, I'm texting them in the morning a reminder. I'm texting them 15 minutes before the class starts, a reminder, emailing them a reminder. And frankly, if I were doing it, I would have, you know, retargeting them on Google and retargeting them on, you know, advertising to a custom audience of your current customers on Facebook with "we're open" and click here to look at your class schedule, right? And as you gradually reopen, I already did the 3-page letter for our members. That's here's all the things that we're doing to be CDC and local and national compliant, and here's the extra steps we're taking to disinfect, and here's the extra steps we're taking to be safe, and then putting it in a priority mail envelope and, you know, and getting it to them that way. Obviously, you can also email it, and you can also text it, and you can also do all that stuff. But people get cheap and lazy, and you know it's much more expensive to go out and get a new student than it is to save a gold belt from dropping out or being confused right now. So you got to stay on top of that. And Master Smith, you're absolutely right on the enrollment process. The thing I like the best when you're on virtual is people are getting in their car and they're showing up at their doorstep with a uniform and a book and their new enrollment packet, and they have on a clipboard a pen with the new enrollment agreement, and they have them initial it right then and there. And you know, people try to shift it to electronic, and I'm going to have them do a DocuSign and stuff. But still, even in the quarantine stage, that personal touch cannot be replaced. You've got to be doing the personal touch and going above and beyond. Then, like with the belt graduations, that's where we've been some really successful drive-throughs. 4 or 5 tables lined up, and their trophies and their medals and their awards and their belts are lined up. And from 12 to 1 on Saturday, people, you know, the beginners come and get their belts, and from 1 to 2, the intermediates come and get their belts, and from 3 to 4, the advanced people come and get their belts, and all of that stuff, and then mailing the stripes. But as we reopen, rule number 1 is going to be we want to market aggressively enough to add 100 students or add whatever you need to get up to capacity. I absolutely believe, you know, which is what the president's been saying at all the press conference, there's a huge pent up demand, and there's students and parents of students who are absolutely going stir crazy looking for something to do. And they're completely willing to join in on virtual, and they're completely willing to join in as soon as things open up on hybrid. They're completely willing to be either protected as they come into the school with social distancing and appropriate measures, or to continue on video for a while. But either way is fine. We can keep all that rolling and just fill the schools up and thrive. Guys, we're over our time, but maybe we can open it up for questions. I think that I can just turn it on where everybody's on here is allowed to talk. And we're not going to get to a couple of our topics, but that's not a new syndrome. So we'll allow you guys to ask questions. And so anything you have, just jump in there. We got some classes going on in the background too. just jump in there with any questions, and I think we can hear most of you right now.
One of the challenges that I'm facing with our school is, you have students at all different levels. And so when you're doing virtual instruction, it's difficult to, target each one of those individual students, because then the rest of the students, aren't at that level. Either they're above it or below it. So what are you guys doing to try to, mitigate that?
Can I answer that, Matt?
Yeah, go ahead.
What you would do is, that's why you keep your normal schedule. It's no different than a normal class. You're teaching basics, and some of the new guys in there are moving a little slower. Some of the other ones are a little faster. I'm going to be teaching a general class, and I'll make comments and corrections just like I would in a normal class. When I'm teaching the class, I don't do it by myself. I'm going to have one or two of my assistants who I might be out demonstrating it. Somebody else might be closer to the computer so they can look and make corrections as they go along. But remember, we don't have to make them a black belt in one class. We just want to give each person a correction or two.
Or utilize the breakout room.
Yeah.
Well,
You're teaching your regular schedule.
Okay. Because that's part of the challenge, because, we have one, like a children's class, for example, has a wide range of skills in it. So, if I'm going over, purple belt techniques and there are, black belts in the class, they're going to be kind of bored.
That's
But
a
I guess
scheduling problem that you already had, and that surfaced more now.
well,
The question was, are you teaching your regular class schedule that you've always taught, or did you shrink it because you're doing it online?
Basically, we've shrunk it because, not as many people are engaging. So,
That's
I still do the regular warm up and stuff, but then I try to target, the people I know that are jumping on. I'll try to go over their, techniques with them.
Oh, okay. So you've got two problems built in that answer. One is you should have the same number of people attending as you would have had otherwise. So if you're dramatically down, that means you haven't done a good job of keeping control of the students, right? So you've got to get on the phone, get the mail out in the mail. You've got to again, we're having a lot of our schools that are 90% of their active student body showing up in any given week, which is about what it would have been in February, right? So that's number one, is you shouldn't need to truncate the class because the attendance is way down. What you should do is make sure you get attendance back up to where it would be, right? Number two is if you're using Zoom, for instance, is the video system will allow you to accomplish what you would have done otherwise. In our case, if I have a class of beginners, and so let's say I have 30 kids and parents, and then I find 3 or 4 of them are having trouble, what we would do is pull those 5 and put an instructor on them and pot them off into their own little group and work with them individually. Well, we can do the exact same thing on Zoom. It's just a breakout room. So I can break them out by age. I can break them out by rank, or I can say Billy, Bobby, Sue, and John are having challenges. Join me in a breakout room and then shift them off, right?
You send them an invitation and they just accept it. It comes right up on they don't have to do anything except accept that you're going to send them to another room.
But see, I also would can I add something there that
Of course.
I wouldn't ever change your regular structure of your schedule, because now you've seen the problem. You've got too many ranks in the group, and that's not what you're normally used to teaching. Teach your regular schedule. And if your class size shrunk, then that's something you got to solve, like Master Oliver said, but it doesn't mean you truncate the classes and squish the class, put more people.
I haven't truncated the classes. It's just who shows up, and I try to teach to them.
Right.
But so you've got it.
Ranks in the classes. So you go back to your regular schedule, because now let's say you fix this and you get the other students back, you'd have to readjust it anyway. And let's say we fix this and we get you lots more new members and you fill up the school again, then you'd have to fix it anyway. So, your structure, part of your structure of your curriculum is that the class schedule is set with the ranks broken down the way it is, so it's easier for you to teach, right? That you don't have your black belts and high ranks in with the beginners.
We do actually in a lot of our classes.
Well,
that's part of the challenge.
Well, why do you have that?
Because otherwise we wouldn't have enough students in each class. So we have a children's class and then we have an adult class.
Okay, well, we should talk because that's not a very useful structure.
Well, you're finding out what some of the problems are with that
Yeah.
structure.
Yeah.
Let me ask another question first, Matt Smith. Pete, right? Pete, how many active students do you have?
We're down from our high. We've probably got about 45 or 50 currently.
Okay. And where were you in February?
Well, I'm saying, maybe a year or 2 years ago, we had about 120. So we've seen a lot of attrition because, unfortunately, in a small geographic area here, it seems like we've got schools popping up every other week.
Yeah,
and in a population that has got, 30,000 people, we've probably got 15 schools.
Yeah, Pete, don't let that be your excuse. That's not that's not the reason. What I'll say to begin with is, we could do an hour on this conversation, right? But really what you need is to get effective at your marketing and add 100 students quickly to your student base, right? What are you charging, by the way, Pete?
Our regular students monthly is $49 a month.
Oh my God.
Whoa.
Okay, well.
Yeah, it's low, but we've met a lot of resistance, as I said, due to competition. And I know it's not an excuse, but
no. Pete, what we need to do is you need to go add 100 students, and you need to add them at a price point that's reasonable. And I don't mean a price point that's cheap. I mean a price point where you can make a living, right? So if it were me and I was parachuting into your school, I can tell you 5 or 6 things. One is I wouldn't get price resistance for most of the people that I brought in because I'd be fishing in the right pond. Number 2 is the rest of the schools in your area don't make any damn difference whatsoever if you do a good job at what you're doing, a good job at marketing. But what you really need to do is you need to just set a time limit for yourself. And, these are unusual times, but, if it were me going in and doing a turnaround, I was always targeting 6 weeks, or a startup targeting 6 weeks to add 100 students. But I'd want to be adding them at $197 a month or more. I wouldn't want to be adding them at $49 a month or less. So, and by the way, it's irrelevant what any of those new schools in your area are charging, because what we make every effort to do, and it's not in all of our marketing pillars, but in most, is a term, I think I stole this from Dan Kennedy, marketing in a vacuum. In other words, we're not waiting for somebody to have the idea to train in martial arts and then go find us on Google in a search. What we're doing is we're getting to them before they had the idea, showing them the value, and then getting them into our process from there. The only place competition matters 15 years ago was the Yellow Pages. If you just sat around and waited for somebody to open the Yellow Pages, and even there, I always made sure that we had, because everybody else's ad was crappy, and usually they were bad ads and small ads. I always make sure we had the most compelling ad in the Yellow Pages. The same way, I'd make sure we have the best placement and the most compelling sequence in Google. But really, in years past Yellow Pages and years current Google, that's the only place that you really have any concern about competition, because they have the idea and they go look. And so if you're just waiting for somebody to have the idea to train in martial arts and then fighting over the scraps, yeah, you're going to have a problem. But again, no, what you should do is you want to, fixating on worrying about teaching class better on Zoom right now is the wrong solution. You got to fix your price point. You've got to market the hell out of your community. We just gave you 5 pillars. There's other stuff, but we gave you 5 things that's working great. And you've got to enroll 100 new students in 6 to 8 weeks at, at least 149 or 197 something that's going to give you a pulse and give you some revenue coming in.
And a good intro enrollment process, which sounds like you need work on too.
Yeah. But
don't let demographic stump you there, because one of our biggest schools is in Johnson City, Tennessee, and I don't know what part of the country. Where are you from, Pete?
Northeast Pennsylvania.
Okay, so you're in a better demographic than her, probably. Johnson City, Tennessee, and its population, if you look it up, it's in the, I think, 50,000 range, but the median income is 30 to 40,000.
Well,
And,
or Mankato, Minnesota.
Yeah,
You know,
and Mankato, Minnesota is a little more up north your way and even farther north. And they had about the same demographic. And both of those schools have done close to 100,000 a month.
Yeah.
Everybody's biggest problem in all of this stuff that we're talking about, whether it's the coronavirus or the stuff that we're talking about, Pete, and for all you guys, is the wrong assumptions at the beginning. The state said I have to close, I closed, and then now you're probably going to be out of business. I'm having problems with people losing their jobs, so now I got to cancel everybody. We've had people tell us that they canceled all their contracts. It just really crazy. It's crazy, but it sort of makes sense. I understand why they sort of make sense out of that. But that's what does.
And transport after school care people who just shut down everything rather than keeping them training and active and paying and so forth.
We've got a couple of those that we've basically talked them off the edge, and now they're doing, one of our schools doing 95,000 a month. And keeping the income that they had before. So we understand that those things can seem logical. So Pete, you're asking some questions. It's not, you sound like a very smart guy. Those things sound logical, but you've got to take the right action out of it. And there's so much bad information and frankly, negligence. It's one thing we're really passionate about, that you get us kind of riled up about some of those things, especially me getting emotional about it. But there's so much bad information you get. So, please take advantage of that checklist. Get that from Bob. You guys really can use that. It's fantastic. I mean, even though I was part of writing it, I used it with my staff and as a tool. So get that. And take advantage of those things. I know we're running out of time, so I want to make sure.
We probably should do one more question, but
Appreciate it, guys. Thanks.
I'll throw one other thing at you, Pete. I hate having just kids classes and adults classes. What I would rather have is family classes and then adult classes, because I want to have every 7-year-old have mom and dad train with them as well. And I know that exacerbates your perception of what your problem is on the correction, but you don't want to have classes with 1 or 2 people. You want to have classes with 20 or 30 people, but the way to have 20 or 30 is to add 100 students and get right. And that way you can make a full-time 6-figure income running the school rather than having to have other sources of income while you're keeping it afloat. Okay. Do we have one more question? Christopher?
I have a quick question. So we've been using the Facebook and everything. We've been using Facebook to get to our children and our students and everything, and it's been working wonderfully. Except I'm not really sure how we should reach out to possibly gain new students, because a lot of people are intimidated by coming to a karate class or going to the Zoom classes for karate and everything. And so I was just wondering if you guys could give us any pointers on that.
Well, I'm not sure what they're intimidated about. I would agree that anyone is anxious about a new experience until they've gotten comfortable and gotten acclimated, right? And when you say you're using Facebook for your current students, that's a different thing than paid Facebook advertising, right? So what we're not talking about is you post some videos and you do some Facebook live videos and stuff, and that's creating, huge volumes of traffic. And for our members, we tend to use an ad agency that handles it for them usually. But we're getting leads at maybe Master Moody, $7, $8, $9 a lead, and then usually it's going to be 65-70% of them make an appointment, and then 60 or 70% of them show, and 60 or 70% of them enroll. But Facebook is not a free medium for driving traffic. It's a efficient and targeted advertising platform. But you're going in and you'd be going in placing YouTube, or not YouTube, Facebook ads. YouTube is also up by 10,000%. So there's a lot of YouTube advertising on.
We lose Master Oliver. We kind of got him frozen there. Well,
Yeah.
to follow up on what he's saying, any of those, Master Smith, you can hear me, right?
Yep.
Yeah. So he's frozen a little bit for some reason with the internet, lovely internet. But what everybody needs to understand is, and to kind of follow up, Google and Facebook, everybody thinks that stuff is free. There are some things you can do that don't
cost effective Facebook advertising.
Oh,
you froze there.
You were frozen, Master Oliver.
Yeah. I think what you were trying to say is that what you got to distinguish is what a lot of people we talk to is they say, well, I'm doing Facebook. And then what they really mean is they're posting things on Facebook, and they're posting their events on Facebook, and then they're waiting for people to like magically show up. That's gonna, sure, go ahead and do that, but that's not really gonna do much for you. What we're talking about is placing ads, and if you want to get 50 leads in a month, you're gonna spend, if it's $7 a lead, that's gonna be $350, $500. You might spend $1,000 on Facebook marketing, but you'd get a lot of leads, and you'd probably fill your school up. So for Pete, who wants to get 100 members in the next 6 weeks, which is what we're telling him to do, that would be one method. But if you spend $50 a month on Facebook, even at $7 a lead or $10 a lead, that's only going to be five members, or I mean 5 leads, which might turn into 1 member. So don't expect results for free from Facebook or Google. That's not why they're in business. They're in business to make a lot of money. That's why they're $500 billion companies.
Yeah, they're cash flowing billions of dollars a year in net profit.
Yeah, exactly. So don't make, you can either market with labor, time and labor, work on your part, or money. A lot of times we'll talk to people and they say, well, I'm working another job and I really want to grow my school, and when the school gets enough money, I'll do it. I say, okay, well, are you going to spend money then to market your school, or are you going to go out and spend 20 hours a week? Well, I can't really spend any money, and I can't really spend any time because I'm working another job, and there's really not much you can do with that. So understand when you're using these media, and we get asked about Facebook and YouTube and other things, those things are paid mediums. For you to get results, you generally are going to be paying in those mediums. And frankly, they're pretty good mediums to pay in if you're doing it correctly. Most of the time, we're going to recommend you outsource to a company. We've got a couple ones that we recommend to our members, rather than try to learn how to do it yourself, because learning how to do it yourself for those mediums, your website, for Google, for Facebook, is really that's a full-time job. It's really hard to do it yourself for any of that stuff.
Yeah, and the thing for her and Pete too, it would be to do a school program. So you jump in, you contact a couple of your elementary schools or middle schools in your area, offer them a 2-week or a 1-month free virtual classes, and then you convert them from there onto your regular program. And we've had schools do that, and that's a no cost or a very low cost, because only cost is going to be what you're giving away. If you're going to give them a uniform, if they come on, or that kind of thing. But it's a low cost or no cost, and if you get 100 people jump on that thing, you're probably going to get 15 or 20 enrollments.
And I think when they call Bob and he gives them the checklist, a lot of that stuff's on there. Make sure you do that. Bob, your name's kind of obscuring your number if they don't have.
It's 720 258
256.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, let me
give it to be done. And then everybody can see your phone number on there, and it's on the chat as well. But when you call Bob and you go through this checklist, and it really is great. It even how to set up Zoom and make sure you have all the settings right, so kids can't like draw drawings in the middle of your class. And there's all kinds of stuff in there that we've learned from experience, because we've been using that platform for 4 years now. It's not just since this all started. We've been using.
No, we were literally one of the first users.
Absolutely. And so we're I hate to say we're experts at it, but we are experts at it. We've been using it for lots of classes like this. So give Bob a call and take advantage of that stuff. So it's all free, and we've got a lot of stuff in there, along with a whole bunch of marketing tools that you can use right now that'll work for you. Some of them we don't want you to use now, because like events, because it won't work. But there's plenty of stuff that you need to be starting on now that I think can help you, and it'll help you a lot.
Yeah, and on that note, 30 minutes longer than we planned. We'll call it a day. Thank you,
All right.
Mr. Dunn. Thank you,
Thank you,
Master
sir.
Moody. Thank you, Grandmaster Smith.
Yeah, but do give Bob a call, and guys, we're willing to give you a couple classes here. Talk to you on the phone, see if we can find out some things that could help you a little bit too. Okay, we're just trying to help the schools out there so they don't all go down.
You go to martialartswealth.com. We'll give you hard copies of a couple of my books and a whole bunch of other tools. We have a whole bunch of things we've done last 2 months as free support. We're happy to give you all of that stuff, no charge. Okay. Thank you, everyone.
Have a good day.
Thank you.